So with regards to whether there's certain populations that are more susceptible and at risk for problem gambling, the answer is yes. That those of us who work in the addiction field know that there's only a small portion of the population who develop addictions, even though you might all be exposed to gambling machines or cigarettes or alcohol. Only a small portion of people really do have a much greater propensity for problem gambling. And the strongest predictor is having other addictions. And so it's no coincidence that 70% of problem gamblers are smokers, and that a significant portion are also alcoholics or drug addicts. So having other addictions is the strongest predictor. Now, the other thing is that poverty, stress, mental health problems, the longitudinal research we've done suggests that having mental health problems, we've always known that depression and stress is a consequence of gambling addiction, but now the longitudinal research is showing that actually predisposes you to problem gambling as well. So having mental health problems, having other addictions, living in an environment where gambling is readily available, those are some of the characteristics that define populations at higher risk. So the encouraging thing about the prevention field is that there's an enormous array of different initiatives being tried. Very innovative things like responsible gambling information centers within casinos or casino self-exclusion programs. A lot of these things don't exist for alcohol or other things. And so that's the encouraging thing, that a lot of different stakeholders, including industry, are thinking about ways of preventing problem gambling. The discouraging thing is most of the things that are tried by most of the time are the least effective things. So information awareness campaigns are very popular. Training employees to be more vigilant to problem gambling is more popular. And modifying the parameters, the speed of slot machines are popular. But those tend to be the least effective things. There are more effective things, and they're the things that work in the prevention of tobacco, alcohol, motor vehicles, etc. One is restricting availability. There's a hierarchy of more problematic forms of gambling, with the more continuous forms where you can get reinforced every 5 or 6 seconds with a slot machine or a casino table game being the bulk of the problems that you see in most treatment centers. It's people having problems with those formats, or things with 24-hour availability, such as internet gambling. So restricting access to the more problematic forms, as we do for drugs, as we do for firearms, that just makes sense. Restricting the availability of gambling more generally in terms of limited hours. There's very few jurisdictions in the world, I don't know about Switzerland, but very few jurisdictions in the world where a bar, a lounge can open for 24 hours a day. So why are we providing continuous availability of gaming within casinos or online gambling? So restricting hours of operation, restricting where gambling is available. You can't buy liquor at any place you want. In most jurisdictions, it's limited to places that specifically dispense that. Similarly, you can't consume it anywhere. So making gambling restricted to dedicated gambling venues is another useful thing. Eliminating reward cards. Reward cards are very common in gambling provision these days, but it just doesn't make any sense that you would reward people for the amount they spend or the amount of time they spend gambling. We don't do that for alcohol or tobacco. People wouldn't accept it. So why are we doing this for gambling? Why don't we just reward responsible gambling? That after you've spent 200 francs, that you accumulate no more points on your reward card, or if you access a responsible gambling message, you gain 10 points. There's ways of operationalizing this that would work. That's just a snippet of a few of the things that would be useful. And again, the prevention report sort of itemizes the things that are known to work against the things that don't work. The main problem these days is most of the things that don't work are the things that have been implemented, and the things that do work are not. Problem there being the conflict of interest, because the things that work have a monetary consequence. That's the reality. When problem gamblers account to 1/3 of the revenue, then if you're going to reduce problem gambling, you're going to reduce revenues. That's the first fact that has to be accepted. there's this huge conflict of interest that exists, both with governments and gambling providers, that gambling providers are in the business of making money, but the research shows that a disproportionate amount of that money comes from that 1 or 2% of the population that have gambling problems. And so, and governments who either heavily tax gambling providers or are directly providers of it through lotteries or whatever, similarly are deriving a disproportionate amount of their revenue from problem gamblers. And so it's no coincidence that the policies that get enacted are the weaker ones, and that there's a reluctance to do things that will really work. But we, as the general public, the government exists to serve the people, not to exploit the people. And that's what's happening right now, exploitation of the people to serve the gambling providers and to fill the government coffers. And so we know the things that work in alcohol, tobacco, these other things. These are the same things that will work to reduce the harm associated with gambling, and we just need to force our governments to do the things that work and do the responsible thing.